It's time for Ask Mike Mondays. Mike answers one listener's question every week. Here's Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to Ask Mike Mondays. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. And joining me today, the mayor, the governor of the great state of Texas, Mr. Michael Becker.
Hey, Paul.
Michael, it's getting about that time to start writing those property tax checks. Big number this year, big check you guys have to write?
Several big checks supporting all the school children across the greater Austin and Dallas-Fort Worth areas.
I'm sure that you're very much appreciated in every classroom. Have they named a couple schools after you, Michael?
They should, I think, after this year.
The Michael Becker Institute.
Elementary school.
What do they say in...
Zoolander?
Zoolander?
Yeah, the Michael Becker School for kids that don't read so good. Yeah.
And so that's Mr. Michael Becker with SPI Advisory. We talked to Michael, as you know, because he's kind of wore two hats. One is a banker. He worked for one of the largest national banks in the country and led his division 6 years, did over $1 billion in apartment lending, and then saw the light and came over to the dark side, so to speak, and now he is an apartment owner in the Southwest. And his group over at SPI, they've purchased over $1 billion worth of real estate, $1 billion worth of real estate. They've done 40 transactions. They've closed on 8,600 units, and they've done, 1,100 investors, Michael?
We're going to do 1,100 K1s. Right now, we're kind of finishing up the taxes as we speak. So 1,100 K1s. I think there's somewhere around 700 unique investors that have actually, given us cash over the last 7 years.
Wow, that is amazing. I mean, that's a lot of work. I would not want to do that. So
I've become really good at pushing paper. I think we've figured out how to do that.
So we turn to Michael Becker on questions that are kind of revolving around your questions, and we want to make sure that we get your questions answered. So if you have a second, if you have time, go into the Old Capital podcast and leave us a question. We want to make sure that we answer your questions. And then if you think we bring value to what you want to know and want to talk about when we're talking about apartment investing, go into iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating if you could. The 5-star rating helps us give you some better information. We can always get higher quality guests when they see that we're in the top, say, 2 or 3 apartment investing shows in the country. So we definitely would appreciate if you went into the iTunes and gave us a 5-star rating. That would help. So don't forget, coming up in April, and go to the Old Capital podcast to get specific information on that. We have Dr. Mark Dotzer. The doctor is coming back for another presentation. Dr. Mark Dotzer was the chief economist for Texas A&M University Real Estate Center. He's the guy that everybody listens to, whether you're a banker, you're an investor. He's the guy that you want to listen to. There's probably going to be 500 people, 400 or 500 people at this event. And so you got our RSVP. It is in Dallas, and actually it's in the city of Grapevine, which is just north of the DFW airport. So if you're flying through and you have a chance to come on in and spend some time with us, and a great networking opportunity with 500 apartment investors, this is what you want to do. So go to the Old Capital podcast and register for Dr. Mark Dotzer. Again, he's an economist that covers the entire nation, the world, about what's going on. So he gives you great insight what's going on. Anything to add to that, Michael?
No, yeah, he's a very entertaining public speaker. So I think he takes what could be a pretty dry subject, makes it pretty entertaining. And like one of the things I've said repeatedly on the podcast, this is a business you can't do behind your desk or at your office or at home. You got to get out, get network, get to go meet people. So, and the 500 people, Paul mentioned that we anticipate coming out. There'll be, several other active sponsors as well as passive investors, as well as a lot of the brokers that sell this apartments in Texas will be there. So if you want to go out, meet people, this is a great event to go do that.
So we will see you then. All right, let's go to the question again. We asked Michael because he has a unique insight on apartment investing and structure of transactions. So he's here to kind of help you understand how these deals get put together. So question that came in from a person that wanted to find out some information. Dear Michael Decker.
Becker with a B.
So that is Becker. So I recently came across your podcast you do with Old Capital, and I'm really enjoying the content. I have a question for you, but it's important I give you a little context first Roughly 3 years ago, I got involved in a business deal, not a real estate related, with the wrong person, and he did a number on me, and I had to file business and personal bankruptcy. I've been told that I need to wait 10 years before qualifying for a mortgage. Would you say that is true? Are there other ways to structure a deal where I can still syndicate and start purchasing properties? I'd love to try to purchase some off-market deals. Would like to purchase using syndication strategies you guys prescribe. I'd love to hear your response based on the knowledge and your experience. Thanks in advance.
I think that's certainly could be challenging to try to kind of go out and start from 3 years ago to now to try to go, syndicate deals. I think there's really kind of two things. Paul could probably talk a little bit more on the financing side of it, but I mean, really, one, you got to qualify for mortgages, and that's certainly obviously, a big chunk of the money, 2/3, maybe, 3/4 of the capital will come from the debt, and the rest typically comes from equity. So, maybe Paul can opine on that a little bit more, but, the other part of it is, this is not a no money, no job, no credit type of deal. So, I mean, to get these deals tied up, one, you gotta front some earnest money and pursuit costs, right? So depending on the size of the deal, I mean, it's not $5,000 to get a deal in escrow. Usually you put in $50,000, $100,000, or if you're doing larger deals, multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars in earnest money. You got to put lender deposits down. $20,000 is not uncommon for a lender deposit. Maybe more, kind of depending on the type of loan that you do. You got inspections, all those things. So, if you don't have the capital because you BK'd out and it sounds like your personal financial situation, you might not have those types of resources. You got to find a partner to do it. And then secondarily, if you obviously you don't have any money to put in the deal, that's a harder road to hoe when you're trying to go raise some capital. I think honestly, my recommendation would be for someone in this situation would be to, hunker down, get a job, do something, find something where you can generate some income, clear up your personal financial situation, live below your means, accumulate some capital. And once you have some capital accumulated, I think that's when probably is a better way of going about it. So whether that's, I don't know a whole lot about it because I've never done it, but whether that's wholesaling houses, flipping houses, doing something like that to generate some quick cash to accumulate some capital, or just get the highest paying job you can that you can maybe earn some commissions, live below your means and accumulate capital. I think that's probably the best thing to focus on before thinking you can go out and buy a multiple 100-unit apartment complex off market, because the brokers, not only their job is to get the best price in these deals, but it's also to assess the credibility and pick the right buyer. So if you don't have any financial resources or you've never done it before, it's going to be pretty challenging to go out and try to buy in a multifamily deal, at least of anything of size and quality. Paul, do you have anything to add on the financing side?
Maybe just a little bit, because that question is actually probably something I hear every once in a while, not too often, at least in the spaces that we're in. I mean, we're not a hard money lender. We're just a lender that, our rates are, 3.5 to 6 or 5%. I mean, we're relatively in the best credit market space that you can get in. But the question is an interesting one, because he filed for bankruptcy 7, Chapter 7 bankruptcy, let's say 3 years ago. And the second thing is he talks about syndication. And let's kind of handle the syndication piece first, because if he's thinking about raising money from other people and he does a private placement memorandum, which, he is doing a kind of an exempt security through, say, a security offering through the private placement memorandum, I think you're going to have to disclose that you've had a bankruptcy, because that is a material kind of announcement to everybody that there's been a bankruptcy in your past. Now, would you agree with that, Michael?
Yeah. When we go put together PPMs, one of the things we have to do is fill out a bad actor form, is what our securities lawyer calls it. And that would certainly be a material issue that you need to disclose to everybody. So, not saying obviously, you can get over it, but you need to disclose it. Otherwise, you don't want to hide the ball a little bit and do a deal and people find that out after the fact. It can cause yourself a big problem down the road.
Yeah, so you're going to have to announce that up front. Now, you may have to be able to put it in writing and explain it of really what happened. But it's got to be disclosed. It's got to be disclosed to your investors. I mean, some people will not do business with you because of the bankruptcy, personal business bankruptcy in the past. But if you can explain it and there's a good spin and it does make sense, I would think that you're able to kind of work through that, especially some time. Time sometimes cures problems. And if you may have maintained your credit and done a good job by paying all back your creditors that you may have filed bankruptcy on or with, maybe kind of work from there. So syndication could be a challenge, just because you have to disclose that part of the deal. Second part is the timing of the bankruptcy. It used to be with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that they didn't want you if you filed bankruptcy for any reason. So if you had a heart attack and then you were off of work and you weren't receiving any income and you had to file bankruptcy because your bills were just getting out of hand, Fannie Mae didn't want to see that, or Freddie Mac didn't want to see that at all. And recently they've kind of changed a little bit of their rules if you're going to be a sponsor of the deal. Now, if you're going to just put money into somebody else's transaction as a limited partner, I don't think that's a problem. That's not going to be a problem because you're just sitting in the back of the airplane looking to the guys in the front of the airplane to fly it. But if the guys in the front of the airplane had filed bankruptcy, we typically are probably going to look for maybe 7 years. So 7 to 10 years is probably where it's going to come out. So you filed bankruptcy, say 3 years ago, you're going to be in the doghouse for another 4 years. And there's really nothing you're going to be able to do about that through the agencies, so Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And then on top of that, they're going to want to have you kind of reestablish your credit. And I'm just going to kind of make sure that you understand. And I'm going to read this kind of right out of the underwriting handbook for, say, Freddie Mac on the small balance side, because if you're just coming back into the market, you can probably buy a small apartment building with a loan amount, above $1 million. But they're going to want to see post-closing liquidity of at least 9 months. So that's cash and cash equivalents, not your 401k or your IRAs. It's somebody that's not retirement based. They want to have you make sure you have your principal net worth to be at least greater than or equal to the loan amount. So just like Michael was saying, you're going to have to start showing that you have some liquidity and some net worth. Your credit score has to be greater than 650. So that's probably the biggest thing. Again, they don't want any borrower default. So if you filed bankruptcy and then you had a foreclosure, that's going to be a tough one too. So, or deed in lieu of for 7 years. So, you're going to have to wait some time. And then also too, that they're going to want to see that you have at least 1 year of multifamily or commercial real estate experience. So preferred and or ownership or management and other properties in the same locale. So one of the things that we're seeing right now, a couple of things, is that if you live in Los Angeles and you're trying to buy a property in New Jersey, or you live in Phoenix and you're trying to buy a property in Dallas or wherever, they're greater than 50 miles, or you live at a distance, that's going to be a challenge for the small balance lenders. They want you to kind of be in that same market. So I had a transaction back last year where I had a high net worth rich guy looking to buy a property in Texas. He was in Northern California, and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac did not like that guy, even though he had lots of money in the bank. But it was his first deal, never bought multifamily properties before, even though he's going to pick up a third-party property management company. But he was out of market, out of sub-market. So that could be a challenge too. So when you're thinking about getting back into the market, when your credit is clean, you have liquidity, net worth, stay in your typical sub-market so that you currently live in. So they want you close to the asset just so you can stay on top of the deal. Michael, anything else?
No, I think stuff happens in life. You got to kind of pick yourself back up. Bankruptcy's there for a reason. So, if you do it, certainly, it's going to be a little tougher road to hoe back. So I think just being realistic about where you are, I think is certainly helpful.
Something that just jumped in my mind. We had a transaction last year that we did. Husband and wife wanted to buy an apartment building. Husband filed for bankruptcy. Wife did not. Husband had bankruptcy with his business, and they were able to separate the assets. Wife stayed clean. They wanted to buy an apartment building. We were able to do it using the wife's credit only. So if the spouse in your transaction is not filed for bankruptcy and then assets we can show that are in her name and net worth is in her name, maybe that's a solution. So to kind of split out the assets.
Yeah, but I think generally speaking, to recap, I think baby steps is probably the way to go. Start by cleaning up the credit, accumulating some cash, doing some smaller deals, and then work your way up. So like Paul said, staying closer to home is probably better. I think of a local prominent guy I won't mention that I know I don't think he filed bankruptcy, but he had a whole bunch of issues with some condominium type loans and all this other BS stuff, 12 years ago. And he's been able to buy, thousands and thousands of apartment units here locally, even though he had some foreclosures and stuff like that on hand. So it's possible to kind of rehab your credit, but just, it takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, every transaction is like a fingerprint. So not all of them are the same. And so, there are ways of doing it. We've done transactions where people file for bankruptcy, but these are professional investors, and CMBS can be a little bit more forgiving.
And if you've never done it, you want to go buy a bunch of large off-market deals out of the gate, syndicating capital from other people, and you've never done it in the past, I think that's pretty ambitious, so I wouldn't start there.
Sounds like some great advice from Michael Decker. Oh, I'm sorry. Michael Becker. So, Michael, if somebody wanted to get more information about, what the heck you guys do over at SPI, what's probably the best idea?
Yeah, the easiest way to find out more information about us is simply go to our company's website, which is www.spiadvisory.com. That's SPI like spy, advisory.com. There's a contact us form. Fill that out. I'm always happy to have a 10 to 15-minute telephone call with listeners I meet off the podcast that potentially want to work with us or maybe invest with us.
And you guys are buying apartment buildings.
We're trying.
What is it? Are you buying these institutional properties? Are you buying these?
Yeah, we'll buy nowadays. We'll buy anywhere from kind of B to A. My most favorite part of the marketplace right now, Paul, really is kind of that. It's a little semantics. You call it either B plus or A minus, but think kind of like mid 1990s to about 2008, 2009. That's kind of my most favorite part of the marketplace. There's still potential to through your efforts, generally speaking, to come through and do some improvements and create a little bit of a lift in the rents by providing a better product. But it's materially newer and you got better construction quality and better construction components than say something built in the 60s or 70s. So I don't have as much kind of the ongoing repair and maintenance issues that tend to pop up on these older buildings. And that again, I say a lot of things, and one of the things is that really hasn't mattered the last couple of years because everyone that's owned a 1960s deal with a chiller has been able to sell it every 2 years
in a bad neighborhood too.
In a bad neighborhood, they've been able to sell it every 2 years. So any sort of repairs and maintenance have been put down below the line because it had some capital set aside to do renovation. So what happens when that money runs out and then your chiller goes out? You don't have kind of upfront capital you raise. How are you going to deal with that because you don't have proper reserves? So that's a bigger issue. And the older the building is, the more of those are real issues. The newer the building, the less of that stuff kind of pops up, Paul. So that's kind of what we've really kind of liked and been pretty successful in buying. We're probably one of the largest A-class apartment owners in Dallas, Fort Worth, and Austin at this point.
Yeah, so you guys are buying larger, higher quality, newer properties with a better tenant base than a property that's going to be in a challenging marketplace.
Yeah, because everything's the same cap rate. So might as well buy a little better deal because something built in 2004 is basically the same cap rate as something built in 1974.
And why is that? Why are the cap rates all the same? I mean,
everyone's got money right now, so the world's a wash in capital, seemingly. Everyone's chasing this. Everyone's needing to value adds kind of the hot thing, which certainly we've obviously done quite a bit of that. And really what's happening is, there's a lot of the apartment groups out there that can go syndicate capital together, which are great. Obviously, a lot of people listen to the podcast or are members of those groups. A lot of people you loan money to are members of the group. So I think those are great things. But the ability to write an equity check between, say, $3 and $8 million is pretty great nowadays. So a lot of people can go pull together, 50 people or 70 people and raise $5 million and go buy a $20 million deal. Not as many people can pull together $12 or $15 million and go buy a $40 million deal. So the competition is really driving the kind of the value add C&B space to really kind of compress the cap rates quite a bit. And so it's just making it where regardless of the age or vintage or location, seemingly, I joke, it's not literally that way, but it's pretty close. There's not as big of a spread between the top of the grade and the bottom of the grade as far as quality and location in the apartment space.
So some great information. Again, give me the name of your company.
Yeah, so again. SPI Advisory, and our website is spiadvisory.com.
spiadvisory.com. All right, that's the great Mr. Michael Becker. Thanks for listening. We appreciate it. Thanks for coming in, Michael. I'm Paul Peebles. Have a great day.